تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. I don't have the clicker, so okay, perfect. So welcome to the second class for Tafseer. Who's, show of hands, who's first time here today? Okay, wow, mashallah. So I managed to scare half of the class, but alhamdulillah was replaced by another half. So inshallah I don't scare the other half this week. Before we talk about the specifics, because a lot of new students will talk a little bit about the logistics of the course. I do want to kind of renew our intention why we're here. Because at the end of the day, if we're not here for the right reasons, we're not going to benefit from being here. And our deeds are going to be haba and manthura. They're not going to count if they're for any reason but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I always like to start these halaqat, at least the first few, with the reminder of renewing our intention. So the hadith I have before you is عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن لله أهلين من الناس قالوا يا رسول الله من هم؟ قال عليه الصلاة والسلام هم أهل القرآن أهل الله وخاصته. It is actually a very beautiful hadith narrated to us by Anas ibn Malik, who says that the Prophet ﷺ says, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his own people from humanity, Allah's people. Think about that for a bit. When you close your eyes and you imagine people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls his people, how special of a status is that? We talked last week about how we are elevated above all other creation because we're humans, but on top of that we are believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us, so that's an extra layer of selection that Allah has given us. Not only that, but we recognize that our deen needs to be practiced. So that's a lot of people don't, even though they're Muslim. So it's another level of selection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored us with. And then that goes up to practicing. So we recognize the importance of our deen, we practice our deen. That's another level of selection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored us with. And then the last kind of layer is that we recognize the importance of the message of the Quran, and those who make the effort to learn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه, right? The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. The best of you. That was last week's hadith. Now we're learning more about these people, the best of people. And the Prophet ﷺ says, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, who are those people, the special people of Allah? And he ﷺ says, they are Ahlul Quran. They are the people of the Quran. They are Allah's people, the chosen ones. The chosen ones. So if you want to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's people, you know what to do. You know that the Quran needs to be part of your life. That's recitation, that's memorization, but that's certainly understanding as well. And this is why we are here. This is why we have this halaqah on campus, to be honest. And this is not, just to come and, check the box like, all the other courses. It is an IDA course. So you can get credit for it if you choose to take the credit route, which I encourage you to do. But we're not here just to check the box, take assignments, tests, walk away, I finished the course. This needs to be something that we take for ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to understand the message of the Quran. It is, without it, it's the GPS of life. Without it, you will be lost. The Quran on the Day of Judgment will come as either one of two. Either shafi'ah for you, an intercessor on your behalf, or it speaks against you. That you did not give it its rights. You did not read it, you did not contemplate it, you did not practice with it. So which of the two camps are you? It's either going to speak and vouch for you, or it's going to speak against you. There's no middle. So everybody has that choice. Where do you want to be on the Day of Judgment? Okay, so with that reminder, inshallah, we renew our intention for today and for the rest of the term when we come here to learn about the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I mentioned last week, we are covering Juz' 30, and we mentioned reasons why. Predominantly because most people, what they know of the Quran is Juz' 30 at least. If some of it or most of it or all of it, it's certainly the first thing you learn when you're young, because the ayat, the surah are short. But also because Juz' Amma is the summary of the Quran. It's the last chapter, and as we know with books, and of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book is not to be compared to any other book, but its summary is in the last chapter of the Quran. So if you understand the summary, you understand the gist of what the Quran is saying, then at least you can start to live your life knowing, understanding the key concepts and points. Now, not all concepts and points are present in Juz' Amma, but the main fundamental ones are. We also mentioned last week that the Quran, each surah, no matter how long or short it is, comes with a main idea. Surah Al-Baqarah came with one main idea. You know how long that is? 2.5 chapters long, about almost 50 pages. And then you have Surah Al-Ikhlas or Surah Al-Kawthar, which are very short. They also came with one main idea. But one's really long, one's really short. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is the long one has a lot of examples, stories, analogies to further elaborate on that main point. Whereas the surah in Juz' Amma are small doses or pills that are just key ideas. Okay? They're key ideas. And this is why it's important to learn these key ideas. We also said last week that Juz' Amma is predominantly from which time of revelation of the Quran? Can some Makki, right? So Makki, we just, if you want to know the difference between Makki and Madani, inshallah ta'ala, you can listen to the audio. I don't want to repeat last week's lecture, but it is Makki minus a couple of surah. And that's important to know because the Meccan surah talk about concepts of believing in Allah, the oneness of Allah, accountability, day of judgment, right? Jannah and Nar and so on, right? Versus Madani, which talk about rules and laws of what the deen came with. Okay, and so we'll talk about the beginning of the juz' shortly. Just a reminder that we're here, inshallah ta'ala, for this semester and the next to cover part 1 of juz' Amma. We won't have classes on the 14th and the 28th, and the class on the 21st will be over Zoom. So if you are a credit student, how many here are credit students? Okay, and how many of you, keep your hands up? How many of you have, keep your hand up if you've registered and you have an account on the IDA website? Okay, so I think most people, if you did put your hand down, you need to, inshallah, to make an account so that the benefit of being a credit student, by the way, a lot of instructors like, I don't know about Sheikh Adnan, but Sheikh Al-Janabi and others are not taking anybody but credit. I'm accepting, inshallah, the audit because I think it's still important for you to learn your deen, particularly the Quran. But the benefit of being credit is that you get access to all the learning materials, the lectures, the audio through the IDA portal. So the requirement to become credit, you can let me know if you want to change this week. We can let you change. However, after next week, we won't accept any more credit. There's probably only one assignment and 1 or 2 assessments. It's not really a it's not a university requirement with all of the assessments and whatnot. So it's fairly simple from that end. So I don't want to discourage you from taking it as a credit. What we'll be covering is the tafsir from different references. Again, we covered some of those last week. I won't mention them again this week, but they are in the slides if you wanted to get that list. And okay, I don't know what's wrong. You have to click it like 10 times. If you're a credit student, please make sure you attend regularly. I would say even if you're not, because your intention here is, again, to learn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message to change your life, inshallah. Participate in class whenever we have discussions, complete assignments on time if you're a credit student. The assessments, again, there's not too many of them, and then make sure you read the communications that are sent out through the emails. Okay? Oh. Can I just get the mouse or something like this? That won't reach. Okay, that's no problem. All right, Juz' Amma. So we started off talking about Juz' Amma. Again, I'll give you some examples of how Juz' Amma is different than the others. If you talk about knowing Allah, which surah of the long surahs speaks to Allah, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting to know Allah? Does anyone know? Yes. An'am, very good. The long surahs, right? An'am. If you want to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, read Surah Al-An'am. It's long, okay? But the short version is in Juz' Amma, which is Ikhlas. They both have one main concept. Again, different perspectives of that main concept, but one's really long, one's really short. Okay? How do you deal with non-believers, right? How do you deal with people who don't practice your faith? If you want to know that, you read Surah At-Tawbah and Anfal, or Anfal and Tawbah, right? That's how you learn about dealing with them. If you want the shorter version, Surah Al-Mumtahina. If you want the really short version, it's in Juz' Amma and it's Surah Al-Kafirun. Very good. Okay, so you see how Juz' Amma is small pills, where the concepts, bare bones, key concepts are presented in Juz' Amma, and that's why it has the most amount of surah in the Mus'haf as well. So it captures a more comprehensive summary of the Quran. We broke down Juz' Amma into 4 sections. Again, this is not the only way that scholars have broken it down, but I'm presenting one way. Okay, and Juz' Amma is 4 clusters. We're going to cover the first cluster, inshallah, over the next couple of weeks. We already started last week with Surah An-Naba. This cluster is made up of 3 surah: Surah An-Naba, An-Nazi'at, and Abas. Okay? Surah An-Naba talks about, so all of them together collectively address the 3 essential components of faith. They're talking about the fundamental components of Islam, of Deen in general, and Islam in specific. Obviously, that's more important than rules and regulations and laws. The problem is we reduce Islam to laws and say this is halal, this is haram. That's not how the Juz' starts. Actually, Juz' Amma almost, I would say, it doesn't talk about any halal and haram. Because Islam, it doesn't make any sense to present what rules apply to everybody when you adopt this deen without first presenting what the deen and what everything is all about. What is the purpose? You can't expect somebody to adopt a system of beliefs without knowing what the belief system, what they're believing in. So this is why, in the beginning, we don't talk about rules and regulations. Talk about fundamental concepts of Islam. And the first surah talks about the story of life. Surah An-Naba talks about the story of life. From whose perspective? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's perspective. Because we said last week, we covered about a little bit more than half of the surah, right? And it says, عَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. That's how it starts. What are they asking about? عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ. About the great news. الَّذِي هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ. The news that they're all in argument about. So everybody's got a different perspective of life. What it's all about, what its purpose is, what comes after, etc., etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets the record straight from the beginning of the juz', saying, this is what the story is about. And we covered last week the first section after the introduction. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. Indeed they will know, surely they will know the truth about the whole story of life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then talks about, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا. Have we not made the earth a cradle? And then he subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, have we not made this for you? And this, and this, and this. And it's all things that we all take for granted. Yeah, we know that the sun emits energy and light. Yeah, we know we sleep at night. We need to sleep, right? These are all things that we take for granted. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the way he's saying it, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is saying, Alam naj'al, have we not made these things for you? Meaning you already know that these things were made for you. You were created, you came out of the womb and everything was set for you. You had nothing to do with any of this. Zero. Absolutely zero. And now you're standing up here and you're saying, I think life is about this. I think this is the belief system. I think. That's what people do. You were just born into everything, and everything was already created for your convenience. And we talked about that last week. So that was the first part. And I don't know if I have the ayat here for the first part. Yeah. So the introduction was 1 to 5, which is what they're asking about and what they're disagreeing about. And then the first set was from 6 to 16, which talks about Alam naj'al, have we not made all these conveniences for you? Okay. Now, after you hear all of these, what is your response? And I don't want you to answer me, obviously, but I want you to think about it. What is your response? Are you not convinced that there is a greater being that has made all these things for us? If we're not convinced, then we need to reflect. No, really, like, I don't want you to just take things at face value. You need to, everybody needs to choose Islam. You may have been born into Islam and adopted it from your parents, but there will come a day, and if it hasn't come already, where you actually have to choose it. You will have to pick it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you a test, and you will have to choose Islam. Because Islam is, I mean, first of all, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you and I the will to choose, the ability to choose. So being born into the religion is a ni'mah, right? Because you get exposed to it early, right? You have formulated an understanding early as your brain forms. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also fair. You have to choose that for you. You are not going to go through life saying, I was born Muslim and I took it from my parents, and that's how, and actually that's not the way it should be. Because that's how Quraysh treated their religion, right? وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا, right? That's how they found their fathers, their forefathers. They found them on kufr, and so they took it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us tests so we can choose Islam. Okay? So if we're not convinced, we need to think about these ayat. And if we are convinced, then what's stopping us from changing? If yes, oh Allah, we understand that, these are all made for us, for our convenience. So what are we doing about it? How has our behavior changed? What are we living our life? Are we living our life where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen is if we have time? Everything takes, its place, and then if there's gaps in the day, I will go to the masjid. If there's gaps in the day, I'll read Quran. If there's gaps in the day, I will, maybe join a committee and do some work. If there's time. That's not how Islam is. Right? Islam is a way of life, and we build our life around it, not we build it around our life. This is why the salah came prescribed, so that we build our schedule around it and not the other way around. Okay? So we have to think about these things. So then Allah talks in this first section about the story of life, what's happened and what's happening. The next section, which we started already last week, which is what's going to happen. And the tone changes, because the section starts with Inna yawm al-fasli kana miqata, with certainty. Before it was Alam naj'al, right? Have we not made? Now there is certainty, because there doesn't make sense to say here, have we not made the day of judgment? Because we don't know. We haven't been there yet. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't witnessed it yet. So Allah is saying, Inna yawm al-fasli. Inna, I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. When you see the word inna, it is Allah establishing certainty. Okay? It's harf tawqid, meaning it's to assure you for sure with certainty we have done, and then the rest of the ayah. Inna yawm al-fasli kana miqata. The day of fasl, he didn't call it the day of judgment. He called it the day of division, because there's going to be people divided into two camps. Inna yawm al-fasli kana miqata. And then we went through describing that day with the section, and it was a shorter section, but what we've noticed is that what applies in the future, the story of life that's to come, is different than what we've lived through. The laws change. The laws change. What's, if you remember, one evidence of that change? What's something that's changed that Allah created in the first part he talks about, and then its nature changes in the second part? Yes. The mountains. Very good. The mountains were described in the first part as pegs holding the ground still. And then this section, when he talks about the future, subhanahu wa ta'ala in ayah 20 says, وَسُيِّرَتِ الْجِبَالُ فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا. Now the mountains are made as if they're moving, and they look like a mirage. So the nature of the mountains changes. And that's to let us know that the nature of what we're used to on the Day of Judgment, completely different. And how does that apply to us? Well, right now, as part of the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is you and I have a choice. We have a choice. On the Day of Judgment, you no longer have the choice because the rules changed. Just like the mountains move, the earth is unstable. It's no longer a cradle to take care of us. Right? Everything changes on the Day of Judgment. We'll read on it, inshallah, and later on in the juz'u, where the sea water is lit on fire. Explain this to somebody in science. Can you light water on fire? Can an H2O molecule light up, ignite, combust? That's what happens on the Day of Judgment, because the rules change. It's not the same anymore. So Allah is telling us the story of life in the future is going to change. Again, this is the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. So we got to that part, and then we also, the next part after that, we got to now, okay, the story in the future about the Day of Judgment, or the Day of Division. And he describes subhanahu wa ta'ala as Yawm al-Fasl. So after he describes Yawm al-Fasl, then he talks to you about the two sides that are separated. The first side is, what did we cover last week? What's the first side that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about? Nobody remembers? Yeah, so there's two sides on the Day of Judgment that Allah divides, right? Which side does he talk about first? Say again? Yes, so specifically what term? Second ayah there. لِلطَّاغِينَ, right? إِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ كَانَتْ مِرْصَادًا. That indeed hellfire is mirsada. If you remember, the word mirsada means waiting to ambush. It's waiting to ambush its inhabitants. And the description is actually quite scary. For who? Who are those inhabitants? لِلطَّاغِينَ مَآبًا. Taghin, again, he didn't say kafirin, he said taghin. Taghin is a more general term. And I want you to really understand this, because we're going to see this again in the next few surahs as well in Juz' Amma. The focus on this term is quite incredible. Taghin is somebody who crosses a red line. And so the red line is the line of oppression. Whether they oppress other people or oppress themselves, they've crossed the line, and they cross it knowingly. And because they cross it knowingly, there's an element of what? When you do something, you know it's wrong, you do it anyway. Arrogance, because you say, I'm above the law. I don't care what the consequence is. I can cross this if I want. There's an element of arrogance. So taghin is oppression and arrogance altogether. It's horrible. And Allah's the first type of people Allah describes in the whole juz'u, al-taghin. Not kafirin, not munafiqeen, taghin. It is a destination. The hellfire is a destination for taghin. And then he describes what's going to happen to them in ayat that are quite scary. So that's where we ended off. We said last time we covered with إِلَّا حَمِيمًا وَغَسَّاقًا جَزَاءً وِفَاقًا, where they're not going to take any cold drink while they're in it, in the hellfire, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, except boiling water and pus, the same pus that comes out of wounds. And Allah says, جَزَاءً وِفَاقًا. Jaza'an wifaqa means a recompense that is matching to what they did. It's equal. It's just. This is not big. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not hasha to transgress what people did. Allah said jaza'an wifaqa. What they did, this is what they get for it. It's matching. It's matching. You'll see in later on in the Quran, Surah Al-Humazah, for example. Right? Surah Al-Humazah talks about people who put other people down, whether they backbite them or insult them or humiliate them or ridicule them, right? So what is the consequence of people who do that? Hutama. They get a place in al-Hutama. What's Hutama? Hutama is a place that has, as part of the hellfire, the fire which targets التي تطلع على الأفئدة, that it targets the conscience. Al-afida. Why the conscience? Because those people attack the conscience of others by putting them down. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they will have a place in hellfire where the hellfire will target that for them. Because Allah is just. Okay? Jaza'an wifaqa. So far, subhanahu wa ta'ala has described these people, the taghin. So, but why? There's no reason, there's no explanation yet why they are being in the hellfire. It's described what's going to happen to them. It's fairly scary, but what happened? Why? So the next few ayat cover that. So let's read them together, inshallah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يلا شباب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. جزاء وفاقا. إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا. So the reason why they're in it, إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا. يرجون in Arabic means several things. It means desire or expect or accept. Accept. Expect and accept. Okay. In this context, it's saying إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا, that they denied, that they did not accept, right? They denied hisab, accountability. This is why they're in the hellfire. They denied accountability. They rejected the concept of I'm accountable for my deeds. Nobody's going to ask me about what I do or what I say or how I treat people. They completely rejected it. And so when somebody rejects accountability, what do? If I know I have no consequences I have to deal with, I do whatever I want, right? And I know that I'm crossing a line, and so what? What are they going to do about it, right? إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا لَا يَرْجُونَ حِسَابًا. Not only that, وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا كِذَّابًا. And they rejected our signs and kidhaba. And this is the beauty of the Quran. And I mentioned this last week, I'll mention it again. You'll see this time and time again. When Allah uses a verb and a noun from the same root, it's to emphasize the verb, the climax of that verb, the epitome of that verb. You can't get any higher than that. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا, when he refers to the Quran that we've revealed it down, nazzalnahu, and then he says tanzila from the same root, it's to show that the Quran was brought down, was revealed to perfection in the highest of quality and in the best of times, in the best of sequence. Okay? The best of everything. Here, وَكَذَّبُوا كِذَّابًا. Not only did they reject, but they utterly rejected with all of their might. They did not at any point entertain. They fought to reject. كذبوا بآياتنا كذابا. It's to emphasize that denial. And this is why they have that punishment. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ كِتَابًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and everything أَحْصَيْنَاهُ كِتَابًا. أَحْصَيْنَاهُ, علم الإحصاء. Does anyone know what that means, by the way? Any Arab speakers? إحصاء? Statistics. So if you take a statistics course, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that أحصينا, we are accounting for all of their statistics, all of their data. You know, whatever data the government has, you know, for your demographics, your age, your family, your social, you know, your financial status, whatever they have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has everything. All of your actions, all of your deeds, it's in a book, enumerated. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ كِتَابًا. It's in a book. فَذُوقُوا فَلَن نَزِيدَكُمْ إِلَّا عَذَابًا. So taste, and you will not increase you except in punishment. So if those people asked to get out, all they get is further, more punishment to taste. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. That concludes the first half of the division on the Day of Judgment. Allah describing to us the story of what's to happen. Inshallah, we can end. Again, we'll end the surah on a positive note. Now it's the other half, which is obviously the good half that we want to be part of. So let's read it together, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, any questions so far? Okay. إِنَّ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ مَفَازًا حَدَائِقَ وَأَعْنَابًا وَكَوَاعِبَ أَتْرَابًا وَكَأْسًا دِهَاقًا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا. So the next part is إِنَّ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ مَفَازًا. So now we talked about what's the first half, which is طاغين, right? Now we're going to be talking about al-muttaqin. Now when I say muttaqin, most people start to kind of say, oh, muttaqin, that's a really like high level status. I'm not there, right? I can't attain that. Well, Allah is using general terms in the surah because it's, again, this is meant to highlight a main point without going into the details as other surah. But being part of al-muttaqin, what does it mean, first of all, taqwa? Does anyone know? What's taqwa mean? We talk about this endlessly, right? Yes.
Fear when it comes with trust.
Fear comes with trust, okay.
Same time, we trust him and we love him.
Right. So, but you know, kind of drill down to the key concept of taqwa is fearing to upset Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, fearing to upset Allah. So to have if you have an element, if to practice taqwa is somebody who approaches an action and before they do it, they ask themselves, will this displease Allah? Will what I'm about to do displease Allah? That is practicing taqwa. If somebody does that, they have taqwa. So it's actually not hard to attain at all. The hard part is consistency, doing that for every action. And this is where we start to falter, right? And some people excel at even the smallest of details, of smallest of actions, and they ask themselves, and some only kind of look at the bigger ones, right? And they justify the smaller ones, and they say, it's not a big deal, it's just a white lie. It's not a big deal, I just talk behind their back. I can just go tell them what I said and it'll be fine, right? So it's levels, depending on how consistent you are in applying it, right? And most people apply in some capacity. So it's actually not hard to apply it, it's just being consistent is the hard part. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and He uses the term inna, again, inna, emphasis, للمتقين مفازة. For the muttaqin, mafaza, fawz, winning. They will win. They will win. It doesn't say success. It doesn't say success because actually, if you look at people around the world and you take a survey, not everyone wants to be successful. There are people that they don't care to be successful. They just want to live simple life, that whatever success you define. I don't need to be there. But everybody wants to win because that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human. Everybody wants to win. Nobody doesn't like to win. Okay? Inna lilmuttaqina mafaza comes from fawz, to win. So what do they get? Hadaiqa wa a'naba. Gardens and a'nab. A'nab is obviously grapes, but it's symbolic for variety of things, variety of food and fruits and things to enjoy, because grapes can be used in a variety of ways, but also because grapes come in bunches. They're plentiful, right? Hadaiqa wa a'naba. Plenty of things for them. Wa kawa'iba atraba, and spouses of the same age. You're not going to get old in Jannah. You'll stay the same age and your spouse will be the same age, right? Wa ka'san dihaqa. And you have ka's, a glass. Sipping on a glass, dihaqa, in luxury. لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا. And they will not hear in it laghu, so any evil talk or insults. You're not going to hear any of that. And half of this world's problems that we encounter are somebody said something. You're not going to hear any of that. لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا. No كذابة. Nobody will tell you, you will not hear lies, and you will not be told you're wrong or you're lying, because there's no lying. جزاء من ربك. Again, the word jaza, a recompense. جزاء من ربك. The other one that we read is جزاء وفاقا, right? The jaza, the recompense, is according to what they did. Those are the طاغين. But here, this is the beauty of the Quran. Here, subhanahu wa ta'ala says جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا. This jaza, this recompense, is from your Lord, to show you the love that He has. It's from your Lord. It's not just jaza. Jaza from your Lord. Because the term Lord means what? Rabbik. The one who cares for you, the one who provides for you, the one who nourishes you, protects you. All part of the word Lord. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala added that. He included the term Lord to show you that it's from Him. The one that loves you and takes care of you. That's the recompense from Him. And then not only that, but a'ta and hisaba. A'ta and hisaba. A'ta, I'll explain to you what a'ta is. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you to do something and you do it, who benefits? It's not for Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't gain or lose anything with any of our actions. You and I give a sadaqah, doesn't increase Allah one bit. We transgress His boundaries, subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't take anything away from Him or his status or His kingdom. Nothing. Nothing we do impacts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of increasing or decreasing. Nothing. So what you do is for you. When you do good, it's for you. You get rewarded. So Allah, not only is He telling you, here's the recipe for success in dunya and akhirah, by the way, so you should follow it because it's for your own good. So when now you do something for your own good, and now He also gives you jaza for it. But it's already for your own good. Why do you need jaza? Because Allah, ata and hisaba. Because He is the most merciful. And He gives abundantly over and over. Doesn't need to give us. The rules are enough. The rules of Islam are enough that if we follow them, we benefit. On top of the benefit, He's giving us rewards. SubhanAllah. Ata and hisaba. This is the difference. And then we'll continue and we'll end the surah. Let's read it together. رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا. Oh, right. Thank you. يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا. ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا. إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. So now the concluding part of the surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after he says, Jaza'an min rabbik, a recompense from your Lord, he's talking about the muttaqeen. And then he describes himself subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Rabbi samawati wal ardi wa ma baynahuma. He is the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything in between them, Ar-Rahman. And he uses Ar-Rahman, the term that you can't apply to anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody can show mercy and you can call them Rahim. Somebody can be generous and you can say Kareem, right? Of course, Ar-Rahim is Allah, with the definitive article of the, right? Is Allah. Allah is the most merciful. Allah is the most generous. Allah is the most patient, etc., etc. But nobody can claim anything from the name Ar-Rahman. That's for him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ar-Rahman. لا يملكون منه خطابا. لا يملكون منه خطابا. Some scholars have said that, like we said earlier, all the laws change on the Day of Judgment. You own your speech right now. Your words are yours. You own them. On the Day of Judgment, you don't own anything. Not even your words. You don't even own, you can't utter anything on the Day of Judgment unless you're allowed. لا يملكون منه خطابا. That's one meaning. Another meaning is that they cannot speak without permission. So not only do they not own any words or speech, but they can't speak unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to speak. لا يملكون منه خطابا. And another one is nobody can tell their story. Khalas, everything is decided. What you had your chance to say to understand the story, the true story, was in dunya. No longer can you now tell any story. Nonetheless, it means you have no control of what you can say because it's all set, right? لا يملكون منه خطابا. Nobody's allowed to say one word on the Day of Judgment unless they're allowed. يوم يقوم الروح. So on this day, and we're getting to the punchline of the surah. يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا. The day when the ruh and the malaika, the angels, stand up in rows. Now, a ruh is typically used for what? To describe who? Who's a ruh? Sayyidina Jibreel. Okay, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. So one interpretation of the ayah is that Sayyidina Jibreel and all the malaika will line up in rows. Another interpretation, the ruh is all the souls that lived of humans. They will also line up in rows along with the malaika as well. Saffa, perfect lines. لا يتكلمون, again, لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال له صوابا. We kind of talked about that already. Nobody owns anything that they can't say. They can't speak. إلا من أذن له الرحمن, except who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows or wills. وقال صوابا, and they will say right. Nobody can, I want to get smooth my way out of this. There's no smoothing your way out of anything. That doesn't work. Sawab is on point with complete accuracy if you're allowed to speak. And now we get to the punchline. ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمُ الْحَقِّ. Indeed, that's the day of truth. فَمَنْ شَاءَ اتَّخَذَ إِلَى رَبِّهِ مَآبًا. This is the punchline of the story of life. فَمَنْ شَاءَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever chooses, whoever wills, اتَّخَذَ إِلَى رَبِّهِ مَآبًا, chooses Allah, their Lord, as their final destination. So we just went through a surah where Allah talked about the story of life, what's happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen. And what's going to happen, there's going to be two sides that are split, Yawm al-Fasl. This is how one side looks like, and by the way, they're there because of their actions, these particular actions, these are taghin, and the other side are the muttaqeen. And now he presents you, فَمَنْ شَاءَ اتَّخَذَ إِلَى رَبِّهِ مَآبًا, whoever chooses, whoever wants, chooses Allah as their end destination. It's your choice. The ball now is in your court. You now know the story of life and what it's all about. You know what the objective is. You know what the goal is. You choose. You choose. You have the choice, but only temporarily. Don't be deluded that you only have it, you'll have it forever. You only have it till you die. When you die, no more choice. فَمَنْ شَاءَ اتَّخَذَ إِلَى رَبِّهِ مَآبًا. This is the punchline of Surah An-Naba. What are you going to choose? Are you going to choose career and status as your goal in life? Are you going to choose desires, sports, right? Social life. Right? All these things are important, but those are not your end goal. You have to choose an end goal. You can't have, nobody can have more than one end goal. It's like saying, I want to go to two different cities at the same time, two end destinations. No, you got to pick one. You got to pick one. Now, there are maybe multiple ways to the destination, but the destination is one. So you can choose what destination you want. Allah saying, whoever chooses Allah as their destination is going to be successful. Now, there are multiple ways to get to Allah. Some people dedicate their life to serve the needy. Some people stand up for social justice. Some people are, take a profession to go help those who are in need, like, doctors in Gaza, etc., etc. There are many paths and ways and routes to that end destination, but there's only one. You got to pick which one you want. And then you got to say, is this really my goal? Or am I really after the luxuries of life? Or, having the flexibility to do whatever I want when I get older? Or I want to retire in a mansion, or, right? So choose your end goal from now. This is not a choice you make later. You got to choose it now, because what you do from now on till you die is based on that choice. So you actually have to really contemplate that. And you have to ask yourself, is it really my goal? Because if it's my goal, I wouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. You can't say Allah is your destination and the routes are not leading you there. So you have to be honest with yourself. All of us have to be honest with ourselves. But this is the punchline. And it's in the first surah of the summary of the Quran. Allah ends the surah with, إِنَّا أَنذَرْنَاكُمْ عَذَابًا قَرِيبًا. We are warning you of a near punishment. It's closer than you think. يَوْمَ يَنظُرُ الْمَرْءُ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ. On that day, that's to come, the individual, the person, ينظر إلى ما قدمت يداه, right? The term ما قدمت يداه is what their hands brought forth. It's an expression in Arabic. It's your deeds, what you present, right? يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه. So the person will look at what they're presenting on the Day of Judgment. Again, what you present is based on what you prepared, right? You have a dinner party, you invite people over, you're going to present what you prepared. Day of Judgment, there's no more preparing. That's the ultimate party. What you prepare for is in dunya. So you'll see that. وَيَقُولُ الْكَافِرُ يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ تُرَابًا. And the kafir, now the term of kafir is used. They will say, the kafir will say, oh, I wish I was just dust. I wish I was just dust. And the term kafir here is used, and one of the interpretations is that because kafir means to deny or reject. And those are the deniers or rejected, those who had rejected the concept of accountability. Okay? That this day will come, this day is coming. They rejected that day. And they will say, I wish I was just dust. Because what happens on the day of judgment? Allah will raise all the souls, including animals, all animals. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will establish justice between animals. So if there's transgression, things will be fixed. And then all animals and all creation, but humans and jinn, will be turned into dust. Because that's it. There's no Jannah and Nar for them. Okay? And so the disbeliever, when he sees them turn into dust, he will say, or she will say, I wish I was that dust. I don't have to be taken into account. Because there's no accountability. There was just justice that will be established because it's the day of justice. Okay? One interpretation also of this is that the people that had the high status, that they oppressed others, that were arrogant, they will wish they were on the other side. They will wish the ones being oppressed or didn't have very much, right? And then the third interpretation is that this is what the shaitan will say, because we know that human is made out of dust. And Iblis was arrogant and he said, I'm made out of fire. Adam's made out of dust. Why should I prostrate to him? And so one interpretation is that Iblis will come on the day of judgment and will say, I wish I was dust. The dust that I was arrogant above or over. Different interpretations. The majority is that the person who denied the accountability and day of judgment will come and will say, I wish I was just dust. That concludes Surah An-Naba, the news, talking about the story of life, what came, what's happening, and what's to come. And it gives you your goal. This is the goal of life. Take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. And that's what we need to understand first before we talk about anything else in the deen. Any questions about Surah An-Naba? Yes.
So in the beginning of the surah, in the middle of the surah, it says Taghin. We said Taghin is like a more broad term. But then the end says Kafirin. It says they will become dust. So what happens to people who don't fall under Kafirin, but they're still Taghin? Like, what's their punishment?
We already read their punishment, right? And earlier in the surah, right? We talked about last week. You missed it last week. إن للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا, etc., etc. That's their punishment. What I want you to know about the Quran too, though, is the Quran gives you the two ends of the spectrum. It gives you the ideal people of Jannah, those who believe and do good deeds. It also gives you describes the other end, the people of hellfire, the disbelievers and the Taghin and sinners and so on. It doesn't give you in the middle. Okay? Because there are many cases in the middle, and that is Allah who will judge case by case. So you get the question, but they're believers, right? They transgressed, but they still believed in Allah. What happens to them? Or the other side is, they're really good people, they're really nice people. They cared to stand up, for social justice, but they weren't Muslim. What happens to them? The Quran is giving you both extremes because there are many parts in the middle. And Allah will judge those because He's the one that judges, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what Allah gives you is the goalposts. If you are believing and do sins, you're not really in the camp of those who believe and do good deeds. So fix yourself, because that's where you need to go, right? So He's giving you the boundaries or the ends of the spectrum that you want to understand which one you want to follow, and you choose that route. So it gives you the two extremes, if you will. And that's the approach of the Quran. Things in the middle, the gray, right? That's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to judge, and He will judge with His wisdom, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes?
Question about the concept of taqwa, how you described you don't want to disobey Allah. Somewhere else in the Quran, there's the part of the ayah, يَخْشَوْنَ النَّاسَ كَخَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. So they fear people they should fear Allah. And is there a difference between taqwa and khashya? Because in my head, they're kind of
Yeah. Yeah, khashya is like the term khashya is more of like it encompasses different things because there's not one English word that covers it, but it really is like there's an element of fear, but there's also an element of awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being in awe, right? So yes, khashya is another term that people tend to confuse with taqwa. Taqwa is how do I avoid Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger? Okay, so it's not just fear, because we typically, people say taqwa is fear. It's you have to be conscious of what you're doing, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're doing something, to be asking that question to yourself. Yeah.
I know it's like different than, for example, Florida. And then I realized that there's like the Taghina Ma'ab, so I was just wondering what is
Final destination. Final destination. The best I can do in English. Final destination. Very good. Any other questions? Yes.
About the last piece where I think the disbelievers, which they turn into dust. What exactly, like, after what event does it exactly happen?
You mean the sequence of events on the Day of Judgment? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, like, there's a hadith that talks about two rams that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals, settles the matter between them, and then he turns them into dust. Because animals don't end up, other creation don't enter Jannah or hellfire. So when they become dust, it's referencing that, saying the disbeliever will see that and they will wish they were that dust, so they don't have to worry about accountability.
And
That's the predominant interpretation. The other ones I mentioned to you are other opinions. I try to give you different opinions of what scholars have said, right? Yeah, no problem. Yes,
Why aren't jinn turned into dust? Can they also be held accountable?
they are held accountable. Yeah, they don't turn into dust. Yeah, absolutely. It's humans and jinn that are accountable. No, good question. Yes.
On when it says and the faithless will say, like, does that only go
Sorry, I can't hear you.
faithless will say, oh, I wish I were dust? Is that like strictly for disbelievers or just like
If you probably want, I should have mentioned it again this week. The translation I give here, again, it's just a translation to help non-Arab speaking folks to just read. But the whole point of the tafsir is to actually go into the meanings, the detailed meanings. So this translation is just there for you to guide you, but it's not, we're going into a lot more detail and what the actual interpretation is versus just a literal translation of words.
does that
Yeah.
believers or
Yeah, kafir is somebody who denied or rejected something. So kafir comes from the term zurra, so people who plant, right? Farmers, okay? Somebody who covers something. So if you have a seed and you dig the ground and you put the seed in and you cover it, that's the kafir, the one who covers. In religious terms, it also means something similar. Somebody knew the truth, but they covered it. They didn't want to follow it for whatever reason. There are different reasons, which we'll cover in the next surah, but they didn't want to accept it for different reasons, so they covered it up. So it's kind of like denying, but deep down you knew it was the truth, but you rejected it until you convince yourself it's wrong. Because people convince themselves. That's how people work. Nobody does evil, nobody does haram, nobody does evil without justifying. Any bad action done by anyone, even what's happening to our brothers and sisters overseas, what's being done to them, people to do something that bad, they have to be able to justify it to themselves, and they do. No human does bad without justification to themselves. And there are different forms of justification. People made me do it, people pressured me, oh no, I have a special circumstance, rules don't apply to me this way, etc., etc. There's always a justification before you do something that's wrong. Otherwise, your conscience wouldn't let you do it. So you have to quiet that conscience down to be able to do it. Any other questions? Does that answer your question? So that's what kafir means. Yes.
You reject parts of the Quran, but that
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
parts of the Quran, would that make you a kafir?
Yeah, so you can't like, yeah, the Quran has to be taken wholeheartedly. You can't, none of it can be rejected. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu udkhulu fi silmi kaffa. You enter Islam wholeheartedly. So if you accept the Quran as the book of Allah, then you accept all of it. أتؤمنون ببعض الكتاب وتكفرون ببعض. That doesn't, Allah mentions that in Surah Al-Baqarah. Can you take parts of the book and leave parts behind? That's what the people of other traditions did, unfortunately. And that's why their religion started to falter. Quran has to be taken fully. You either accept or you don't, right? Does that answer the question? Okay. Yeah, okay. One more question.
Is it for disbeliever?
Where you accept some and you reject some. I mean, like that term that term's got a lot to it. So let's hold off to answer the hypocrite term, because there's a lot of elements to hypocrisy. Okay, but really, if you distill it down, it's the definition of hypocrisy is your outward does not match your inward. Your actions don't match what you really truly believe. So you do something just to show, right? But deep down, you don't believe that. That's hypocrisy. And I'll keep it there because we can talk about this for a long time, inshallah. Okay. I did start 10 minutes late, so I do apologize. I did promise 6:45 typical, so but our commitment's till 7. So I'm just going to take 5 more minutes just to introduce the next surah. We'll introduce it so that next week, inshallah, we can finish it. The next surah is, where's my... So, Surah Al-Nazi'at. And Surah Al-Nazi'at is the second part of the first cluster of surah in Juz' Amma. And this surah talks about a very important concept. It talks about your inner convictions, the nafs. The nafs, why is the second surah now all of a sudden talking about the nafs? Because the nafs is the first component of finding your way back to Allah. If you choose Allah as your destination to find your way to Allah, the most important variable in that journey is your nafs. Your nafs. A question back there? Okay. The nafs. People often look for trying to fix, they look around themselves to fix problems, or they look around for happiness. Everyone looks for happiness. Some people look in wealth, some people look in fame, some people look in status, social media, friends. The irony of it all is Surah Al-Nazi'at tells us that the most important variable in the journey to Allah is inside of you. So to get happiness, you don't have to look externally. It's all internal. It's right within your own body. Everybody looks out to figure out how to be happy, but it's inside. You don't have to look anywhere. It's really inside. Surah Al-Nazi'at tells us that. And the most important part of that journey is fixing that nafs. And so this is what we're going to be covering with Surah Al-Nazi'at. So let's read it together, inshallah ta'ala. Actually, just before I read it, I'm going to give some of the different names given to Surah Al-Nazi'at. Surah Al-Nazi'at also is referred to Surah Al-Tamma, okay, as per another word later on in the surah. Also Surah Al-Sahira, which is also another word used in the surah. Different names for the surah. The predominant one is Surah Al-Nazi'at. Okay. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنازعات غرقا والناشطات نشطا والسابحات سبحا فالسابقات سبقا فالمدبرات أمرا. So the beginning of the surah. Now, I want to give you also a different perspective. Some scholars have said these are referring to different types of angels. Some refer to different types of like wind. Okay, there are different interpretations. The interpretation I'm going to give you is based on the introduction I already gave, which is the inner conviction, the nafs. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll end with this inshallah ta'ala, starts the surah with 5 ayat that are oaths. Allah is taking an oath. A lot of surahs start with an oath. When you hear an oath, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to take an oath, by the way? He doesn't need to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath for different reasons. What I want you to focus on is two things when you hear an oath. One is what Allah is taking the oath by, and what's to come after the oath. Because if I say to you, Wallahi al-Azim, Uqsim billah, Wallahi al-Azim. Has anyone heard that, by the way, at home? When you hear that at home, what does that imply? What I'm about to say is important. What's to come is important, right? It's to get your attention, right? So when Allah takes an oath, it's to grab your attention. What's to come is very important. Don't take it lightly. All of the Quran is important, but especially if it comes after an oath. So that's the number one thing, is what's to come after the oath, you need to understand, and what the oath is by. What is Allah taking the oath by? So Allah, how do you know if something's an oath? Allah starts it with wa or fa. You see 5 ayat? The first 3 start with wa, the next 2 start with fa. Okay? What's the difference? I'll explain shortly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا. Nazi'ati means, I'll give you the different meanings. If it references angels, I'll go through the ayat reference to angels. Nazi'ati gharqa are the angels that nazi' or nazi' is to rip or extract something with force. Okay? So it's talking about the angels that rip the soul out of the body by force. Whose souls are these? The people who disbelieved and or sinned, right? The part of the end of the spectrum we don't want to be. One nashitati nashta is referring to the angels that take the souls with ease, with gentleness and ease. And that is the other, the people who feared Allah, believed in Him, and did good deeds. Okay, so that's one interpretation. The interpretation we're going to talk about more is the souls. Or not, I shouldn't say souls, I should say the nufus, nafs, the inner convictions. The nafs that you have within you, there are nufus that are, if you try to extract anything, in the first ayah, وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا, extract something, you don't get anything good. Because that nafs is drowning. Gharqa comes from gharaqa, it's drowning. It's a drowning nafs. It's drowning in sin and desire, and any good you want to extract from it, you can't get anything. So that's the first type of nafs Allah describes. The next one, وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا, comes from nashit, comes from a nafs that is doing good. It has energy. It's using the energy to do khair. Okay? Nashta. That's the second type of nafs. Now the third type of nafs, وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا, the gracefully gliding nafs. It's gliding, it's always beating other people. It's like on another level. And so those are three oaths by 3 different types of nufus. There are 3 types. If you actually go to Surah Al-Waqi'ah, Allah divides people into 3 groups. Does anyone know those groups? السابقون السابقون, أصحاب اليمين, and أصحاب الشمال. السابقون, those are the ones that are always at the forefront, always beating everybody in good deeds. They're always winning the race. This is referencing ayah 3, right? Ashab al-Yamin, the people of the right, is ayah 2, and Ashab al-Shimal is ayah 1, the people of the left. Okay? 3 types of nufus. Okay? Now, what about ayah 4 and 5? When you see fa, it means it's an oath, but it's connected to the previous oath. So 4, the oath in ayah 4 is connected to the oath in ayah 3. So it's talking about the same nufus. فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا. They are always, that nafs is always beating everybody. فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. And that nafs that we're talking about, the third category, the best category, مُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. It always sets goals and seeks to achieve them. It's driven. It's got a defined objective in life, and it pursues it. It's not just coming and saying, oh, any good deed that come, I'll do. Great, that's good. But on the day of judgment, yes, you will be accountable for your deeds. But you know what the human will ask themselves? What they will think about on the day of judgment? They won't think, they'll think about their deeds. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. What they will think about is what their goals were. What did they pursue in life? That's what they will regret. And so, what are your goals if you want to be in the third category? فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. They set out goals, defined, they're khair, they help, they're serve the purpose of the end goal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they pursue it. And they're always racing other people to goodness. And they're always gracefully, their souls are gracefully gliding. That's the last category, that's the third category, and that's the category we want to be. This is the introduction of the surah to the different types of nufus. The nafs, the inner conviction, the thing within you that dictates whether you do good or not. You know that voice that you hear? Oh, I shouldn't do that, right? Or maybe I'll do it. That is what we're talking about in the surah. Okay? That psychology, your consciousness. Okay? I don't know how to accurately give the definition of nafs, except maybe consciousness or your psyche. Okay? Because why is it important? Why is it mentioned in the surah? Because this is the number one thing you need to understand in your journey to Allah. Because that's what helps you move left or right. With that, I will, inshallah, close. Any final questions? I wanted to introduce Surah Al-Nazi'at. Inshallah, next week we will complete it. Any final questions before we do the Kahoot? Okay. It's all yours. Do you have it set up?
We're gonna put it up right.
You're going to put it up right now. Okay. Jazakumullah khair. So I'll just close up. Please stick around for the Kahoot, the brother and or sister. Last week it was sister, so they took the effort to put something together.